Earlier today, I had a conversation with Reverend Laura Merrill, who is the assistant to the bishop, as well as director of clergy excellence, I think is her title, official title. But she's also a candidate for bishop and endorsed by the Rio, Texas delegates. And we talked about being the church in this age of COVID-19, but also some of the other issues facing the United Methodist Church today. I hope you'll enjoy this conversation with Laura Merrill. I mean, this whole thing kind of started way back when we first really Texas hadn't even been hit very hard with COVID. We were just entering into it, and a buddy of mine up in New York was right in the middle of everything, and we'd had a conversation, and I thought, gosh, I'm going to Zoom with Michael and kind of get his perspective from where they were at that time, and now assuming that we could very well be in that, and I thought, gosh, I just keep going and
here we are. Yeah, no, it's very cool. It's been so interesting way to kind of well, you're obviously a curious person. There were 0 softball questions in the email that you sent me, and so you're thinking about important things, and it's great to host a conversation, and let other people overhear. I think that's lovely.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I thought with some of the folks I've talked to, I thought, what if I just got to have a conversation? What are the things that I would go, okay, here are the things that I'm interested in. Whether anybody else is interested in them, I don't know. But
right, absolutely. And of course, as I did finally write you back this morning, I said, I shudder to think how many of the questions I'm going to need to answer with "I don't know." Because that's my stock answer for many things. But
I'm sure you have plenty of people telling you, giving you their opinions on multiple issues.
There is some of that. Yeah. So. But yeah.
Well, we are we're in the midst of some unprecedented stuff, really, and the difficulty of being connectional and trying to be the church. And we had our Zoom staff meeting yesterday, talking about for a while we were thinking along the lines of how do we get through this to the other side? How do we temporarily do church online or video or whatever? How do we and till we can get back to normal? And that included some of the outreach things we were doing that we put on hold. And now we've been more in the process of thinking how do we be the church, recognizing we may have to make some substantial changes and not just kind of put things on hold. So Laura Merrill, how do we do that?
Yeah, because I have the answer to that one. Well, so it's interesting. I was at a Texas Methodist Foundation board meeting a couple of weeks ago, I guess it was, and John Thornburg, who's on staff there, shared a kind of what would you call it, a framework for understanding traumatic events, especially in the life of kind of a community. And it's not just talking about COVID, but it just speaks so well to it. And this comes from a nonprofit that deals with trauma and crisis. And he said that there are 3 stages to this kind of event. And the first stage is the heroic stage. And I remember that so palpably, almost in my body. Like, everybody was home. Everybody was like, we were all flipping out. And yet we knew that we just need to hang together, and we're going to get, all the yard signs, we'll get through this together. People trying to find what's the cool thing that I can do to make this better. Mm-hmm. And so pastors especially, my goodness, and especially in a smaller church where there's less staff, pastors had to ramp up like 140%. They had to become video producers. They had to learn the difference between posting on YouTube and going live on Facebook. And then the church all broke Facebook on Sunday morning. And then we had, preachers had to learn all that stuff. And laity as well, who were part of that team. But everybody just threw in hard during this heroic stage, and everybody just did, and then this lasted long enough that you move to the second stage, which is disillusionment.
Mm-hmm.
And the disillusionment stage is where this framework says it's characterized by exhaustion. It's characterized by self-doubt. What was all of this for? I did all of that and it didn't change anything, or it doesn't feel like, this is making a difference. And I'm worn out now, right? And it's that, how long can you be a hero and sustain more than 100%? The things, all the children at home, people with little kids, you can't work full time and take care of a child at the same time. You can't. And so people doing too much, right? And because they have to. So everybody's exhausted. Then the third stage, which is some of us sitting in the central office, we're trying to get to the third stage quicker than people were ready. And I'm not sure that people are still completely ready. But the third stage is the turning. And the turning is into the new reality. It's like what is not coming back for whatever, this wasn't just a blip or a storm. There's another scenario that talks about the difference between a blizzard and an ice age. And that we know we're not in a blizzard. We're probably maybe not even in winter, maybe in an ice age of shift. And so how do you turn toward that? It talked about that turning is predicated on rest. The exhausted people have to have rest before they can finally say, okay, let me pull my chair back up to this table and ask, now what? And the questions you're asking as a staff are the questions. Like what, instead of doing all the old things with new media, in a new way, what are the things we need to do right now? Mm-hmm. And what are the things we can stop doing? And are there new things that need to be done based on the life of our community? And what tools and resources do we have in order to accomplish that? So that's a different kind of question, but you got to have your spirit a little rested up to be able to kind of have the courage, to step into that new reality and kind of embrace it, because there's some stuff about this time that's been heartening, and kind of like, wow, that's kind of cool. Like, I didn't know we could do that before. Well, but you have to have the energy to be able to ask those questions.
That's really cool that you say that. I got a little goosebumps on the back of my arms here, because our entire staff, we met with SPRC committee and our entire staff, including the clergy. We've made it mandatory for everyone, full-time, part-time, didn't matter, to take a spiritual renewal week between now and August 31st, so that we can be preparing for that. Not vacation, doesn't go against vacation, doesn't go against, it's just purely a spiritual renewal week.
That's so wise. That is so wise.
Hoping, it helps prepare us for exactly what you're talking about in moving into that.
And I think there's a degree to which this weird, disorienting time can keep us even from taking whatever Sabbath we were taking before, because every day's the same day, over and over, Groundhog Day kind of. Anyway, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I think that's exactly. That was exactly the reasoning behind doing that, so that everybody has that opportunity, not for a vacation. We still have our vacation, not for, but purely to do whatever it takes for them to renew themselves spiritually. Now, for some, it may look more like a vacation. It may be climbing to the top of Enchanted Rock, or it may be sitting isolated on a beach or something like that. But it's that connection with God that we're needing to have that renewal so that we can come back with a refreshed and renewed vision, and recognizing what we're up against in terms of hey, this is something that we're living within, whether it be the ice age or what have you, and how do we approach that? How do we not press pause on outreach? How do we not press pause on mission? How do we continue to do those things rather than just pausing and waiting?
Right.
So, and I think that's great. But I know in your position, surely you've seen some different churches that have really stretched their muscles and grown as a result of having to deal with the situation that we're in. People doing new and unique things that might not have come about. Are there any cool stories or anything that you would share?
Sure. I mean, there are a couple of cool stories. I mean, one is, and this comes from our conference treasurer, Kendall Waller, who has said that just in his experience watching churches, that the ones who are clearest about a sense of mission and purpose right now are the ones that are doing best with regard to finances and with regard to, I don't want to call it attendance, but just participation.
Right.
And the energy around those things. And I think any church that's able to find its purpose and its reason for existence outside of itself has got, they've taken a good step. And so, I mean, I know First Victoria, and of course I love, that church, and that was my first place to serve as a pastor. Really have been inspired by so many of the different ways that the saints of that church have decided that their life and their faith, are connected to the lives of other people who aren't in the church. Mm-hmm. And it's not just about trying to get people to come to your church and be part of it. This is about being present and giving life, right, and sharing life with other people. And so those churches, that's about then, what does my community need? That becomes one of your first questions. What's going on around us, and what do we have that could meet that? What has God placed in us or given us or whatever? So churches that used to have a food pantry distribution once a month for 150 families are now feeding 500 families. Yeah. And they have 3 times as many people from the church involved in that ministry as they did before. And is that building relationships? I don't know. But the fact is, we know that, for many, many people in this economy, if you don't work, you don't eat. And a lot of people aren't working. And so that's just basic. So those enormous food programs have really kind of been heartwarming, because the food bank can't do it all themselves wherever it is you live. And for folks to see that as a privilege to serve in that way. The other kinds of things that I think are so interesting are where, we have pastors, I won't name them because I'll get them in trouble. We have pastors and perhaps some laity who are coming out of this saying, I don't really know that we need our building. Now, for some pastors or some churches, if you have a building that's really far away from where all your people live, because maybe that community has changed and the people who go to that church are largely people who used to live there but don't anymore. There are lots of dynamics around that. But that whole questioning about what is our building for, that's a turning question now, and that's a big one. But so instead saying, how are the ways we remain connected with each other and and invite other people in? And so you have everything from one church, or I'm sure more than one church, doing Zoom conversations on book studies on anti-racism, for example. Mm-hmm. And that's a really easy way for somebody who doesn't really want to be in the church to be a part of a Christian community that's having a conversation that matters. And you just build that based on relationships of people. There's one church that's doing communion in the front yard of members' homes. I think Wade, we talked early on with the whole communion question, right, what makes it legit and what doesn't. And I think I really thought that I was going to just fast until this was over. And finally it's like, dang, this is not going to be over.
Right.
And not only that, I don't want to be like, have a hazmat suit to take communion. Like that's not good either. So experimenting with what are the parts of that ritual that are meaningful, and how do you connect people, not just to the getting the elements or cracking open the little Jesus in a shot glass, whatever the little thing, plastic deal is.
Pop Jesus.
Yeah, Pop Top Jesus. There it is. But how does the prayer, the great Thanksgiving prayer, engage people? And I've done that on Zoom in a very intimate way. And I had bread and juice in my own home, and it brought me to tears. So rethinking the purpose of our rituals, even funerals, these funerals where you'll hear only 10 people, right, back in the when that was a restriction.
Mm-hmm.
There are ways to engage more people than 10, and how can we do that well? How do we use technology? I heard about an iPad standing on a stand, and one of the grandkids was talking at the funeral. I mean, it can be done. And not only it can be done, it has to be done. We have to do these things right now because it's what people need, and people have to stay safe. This church getting 65 people sick after somebody had worship and stuff, that's ridiculous. There's no reason for us to be doing that to each other.
Yeah.
I really do think, though, that in the places where folk have enough elasticity to ask, why are we doing this and what's the purpose? That leads you to either the new thing to do or the new way to do the thing. And children need connection, and they need connection with somebody besides their parents.
That's been one of the really difficult things for us, is because it is. It's hard enough to lead a group of children on Sunday morning, much less add on top of that trying to keep them apart from each other or slobbering on toys or what have you. And so we really have. Brooke Mercer is our director of children's ministries, and she's done an amazing job with sending things to the children and doing things online, but trying to engage the parents with the kids by she's done an incredible job. But at the same time, we think, gosh, it's a difficult area to navigate.
It really is. And my daughter Caroline, who was born while we were in Victoria, she works at the nursery at Coker here in town, and they have kind of been in and out of, a little bit of childcare for the workers who were doing this event or something like that. But it's extremely complicated to bring people together. And in some ways, and then little kids who got their belly full of online work, for some kids that's a great medium, and other kids it isn't. And how do we figure out, outside distancing? How do we figure out some combination of online? And I mean, that children, I don't even begin to pretend to be the expert on how you do that well in this time. But I do think that, the other thing that I'll say, and this is not a church example, but I just, with this kind of respiratory thing that I've got right now, which I will say I feel better after a day of antibiotics. So I'm thinking that I'm just decided that that's what it is.
Right.
But in the process of trying to get seen and try to be seen and not get sick with a bunch of other people who are trying to get seen because they might be sick. I mean, this is worse than flu season in that regard. I went in this never-ending loop of trying to make an online appointment and calling them on the phone and the voicemail, and then the appointment site doesn't work. It says, you have an appointment. Oh, wait, that's already been taken, and now you're 5 days out. Ridiculous with all the clinics. I ended up in this, I didn't never heard of it, but it's a healthcare provider agency that doesn't have a building at all.
Mm-hmm.
They have one building in Austin, and they're based in Austin, and they're owned by the doctors and the whoever. And they see you virtually, and they have their network of people who work for them in Dallas and in San Antonio. And if you need to be seen, apparently they come to your home. And otherwise, they see you online.
Mm-hmm.
And now what they can't do is touch you. They can't touch your body. But they can do other things. And I think probably a lot of diagnoses can be done by us just talking.
Mm-hmm.
They have a testing site that was a tent set up in a bowling alley parking lot. And I'm telling you, from 2 hours from the time I heard about them, I had been seen and evaluated and tested.
Mm-hmm.
And they had all my information. And I'm just like, and they don't have a building, and they're not worried about the building. They're not doing all the things that churches have to do around a building. That's a huge, wow. I was just blown away. It was well done. It was so well done.
Right.
And I just think, what, not that that's an easy analogy, you just lay it over the top of the church, but like, what do we not know? What do we need to be rethinking when we think about living as a Christian community in the midst of a larger community?
Right. Some of the things that we're stuck in, and not necessarily get rid of, that may be an extreme, but going, okay, what if we just kind of been stuck doing because, it's that age old, we've always done it that way. And now we're maybe forced to not do it the way we've always done it. And again, maybe cause some real growth to happen if we go there. I
think the disorientation, people, the saying of, never waste a good crisis. I think disorientation, which is what we're living in the middle of, is what allows us to maybe see something different. Mm-hmm. And to ask different kinds of questions.
Right.
And the Holy Spirit works in community and helps conversation being the currency of change. Another little quote, it helps us see things when we talk together and wonder together, and we bring our lives and our questions together.
So speaking of change and all of that kind of stuff, and
yes.
And when I initially shot you an email saying, "Hey, let's talk," I said I wanted to ask, what in the world would possess anybody to consider the Episcopal office these days? And kind of said that tongue in cheek, but I mean, the United Methodist Church is doing some amazing things, and at the same time dealing with some difficult issues. And I think over the last few months, we've seen even more things kind of rise to the surface, like racism. And so what, obviously, you have been endorsed by the Rio, Texas conference for bishop, and we'll see what happens.
Conference delegation, not the whole conference.
Right. The delegation. So, which, gosh, what was it? A few years back, you came pretty close to being elected bishop without an official endorsement.
Well,
anyway, I think that's a wonderful thing. But that's what are those top issues that you think that we have to address in the near future as a United Methodist Church?
Yeah. Well, I mean, oh gosh, I mean, it's a multi-layered, tendrily kind of question and answer, in my opinion. One thing that I'll just say about the office of bishop is that I think that just as local churches are having to wonder deeply about why they're there and what their job is in this moment, I think the denomination is having to ask the same question, and even beyond the kind of 2019 St. Louis protocol, way forward, all of that conversation is still there. It's just we're not consumed by it in the same way publicly right now. But I think this bigger question of the institution and the layers that have built on top of themselves, or that we have built, right? That we have that we have constructed, that is going to happen. That conversation and some of that deconstruction is just going to happen to us. It is happening to us right now, probably, as a result of this crisis. I heard Bishop Sines the other day say, and he didn't make this up. Several people are saying that if you want to talk about decline in the institutional church, that COVID has pushed that up 10 years. That in places that were already fragile, places that were already, not so clear about why they existed, but we're still kind of going through the motions, some of that will not survive this. I think mission and purpose will survive. But that the institution and the annual conference is part of that. It's a big kind of nest in the middle of that. I think we have to look at what's the role of a conference and what's the role of a bishop in a conference. And there's a lot of certainly that's one thing that the WCA took on the right, to say, we're going to shrink that book of discipline back down to here. We're going to have fewer rules. We're going to, they have kind of taken their approach to, winnowing down what has been built up. But it's not just got to happen. It's going to happen. It's going to happen to us. And we also need to claim that crisis moment to ask, what is God calling us to do in light of this right now? And so how does the job at bishop need to be different? Is it still this kind of administrative CEO and the inner sanctum of the best bishops aren't living it out that way anyway, but there's a lot you have to fight against. And just like you waited, a church of some substance and size got a whole bunch of institutional stuff that you just have to do. Somebody has to do it, and it's your job to do it. And that's not what you went to school for. And it's not necessarily what God called you and gifted you to do. Sometimes God gifts us to do those things. That's a big conversation. And what's going to be the role of bishop in a church 10 years from now? I don't know. I'm hoping it's about vision. I'm hoping it's about purpose. I'm hoping it's about, telling the truth and inviting conversation and, just kind of leadership in that way, and holding the body to its identity. I think, and why would anybody want to do that? That's a really good question. Like I don't, and I'm going to say that, in February, several candidates from this jurisdiction all did interviews with all the delegations of the jurisdiction, that's the body that elects bishops. And in fact, the elections would have been happening this week. Today was the first day. Would have been the first day of jurisdictional conference. The first ballot might have been held today.
Right.
And the gap between that February meeting and what is actually going to happen, there is no way to tell. No way to tell. Jurisdictional conference is set for next November of 21. And I just feel like the expanse of water we're going to have to swim through is, I don't know how we know what lies on the other side of that. We just can't know that. So I'm just trying to spend every day trying to ask, how can I be helpful today from where I sit? And
even there, when we talk about some of the, the kind of the elephant in the room for the last 40 years that has kind of culminated in some real talk of a split in the United Methodist Church. And that's, my mind has been able to take a pleasant break from that because of the pandemic. So I'll put that in the plus column for the pandemic. But my hope is that by pushing General Conference out and that there is some more clarification on some things, that there's more time to work through the possibilities of split, because it's a difficult thing for me to sit here and go, okay, if I'm going to have to make a decision, if churches are going to need to make decisions on whether to go or stay or what have you, that whole idea of vision and mission, and I want to have clarity on those things, because I don't want to make such a big decision based on what I know about two different churches,
Mm-hmm.
because I know where they stand on one issue.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hard thing for that. I think that's the thing that's maybe churned my stomach the most, is I want to have more clarification on the direction this new denomination is going to go, and the direction this new denomination is going to go, regardless of the one issue that I know
Mm-hmm.
that they
Right.
hold. So
Disagree on. Yeah. Well, yeah, there's a lot. It's there. There's a lot that the metaphor of building the plane while you're flying in it is going to be true for these. And whatever they say, either side or more than one, perhaps more than two, what they say and what they do will be two different things. Mm-hmm. Because what people hope to accomplish will always encounter the real world in a way that causes you to change what you thought. That's my experience in the world. And so I think, I don't know that I would, I think both sides, if we're going to talk in a binary way, right. Are looking at more than just that issue. The question of the role of LGBTQ persons in the church is one that I know there are still people who kind of have. It isn't always a clear black and white thing for people. I do feel like the fighting over it is going to have a different. We're sitting in a different place now, and because this crisis has just changed the context for that conversation. Now, it doesn't change people's opinions in the conversation, and people's convictions. I guess I'm not really answering the question. I guess I feel like, though, that just like the WCA has said, their goal is not just to kind of make sure that people all stay in line on the church's traditional stance on homosexuality. Mm-hmm. They also want to, reduce this kind of bureaucracy and do some other things. And on the UMC Next side, the platform includes anti-racism as, holding equal kind of weight with LGBTQ inclusion. And so everybody's trying to do more than that, is what I'm trying to say. I'm taking a long time to say it. I think the role of the church in this society has shifted so dramatically. And there's some great studies of how that has happened and what that's looked like and why that's happened. But we just can't keep sort of putting patches on things and continuing. We have to ask fundamental questions of purpose. I think the Way Forward plan, which did not get adopted, was predicated on the value of contextual ministry, and that you be able to serve in the place where you are with people around you and the people in your communities. And then, of course, that's not as easy as it sounds. I'm sorry, my dog is barking.
Mine was living here earlier.
Yes. the contextual piece is a high value. So you have to look at what are the values of the competing kind of branches or whatever, not competing, but the different branches, right? Sister branches, hopefully. What are the things they're putting at the top of the value list? And you mentioned in our kind of email originally this, like, not sure that the church's stance is incorrect, but think it might be possible that the church might have been incorrect. And I just feel like, for me, a church that allows me to think that the church might be incorrect is the church that I want to be in. That I think that's been a hallmark of United Methodism, and the reason so many different kinds of people find their home in this denomination is because, Wesley did have us bring our brains to the table and our experience to the table, and to talk about those things in light of, obviously, scripture and tradition. So the questioning, the room for questioning is important to me. So I think you just have to look at what are the values that any of these branches are holding up us, in addition to or aside from, either way, its stance on the issue that seems to be the bright line that divides us.
Well, and I think maybe that's, you hit on it, that I value tension. Not spirited,
conflict,
arguing,
right?
But some tension, some accountability, and some and I think that's good and healthy, and that's what I hope we don't lose in either of the sister churches, or however, that we don't go, okay, we're going to take our ball and go play over here. We're going to take our ball and play over here, because we all, and that's probably not even a reasonable expectation if you have 4 people. It's there's always probably some tension, but my hope is that there is tension, good, healthy tension within,
creative.
So.
I hope so too, and I think that could be true on in both directions.
Right.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Well, so I don't want to take up all your morning here, but I do want to ask one question. I shot it to you in an email because I thought it was I don't know, I think it's interesting. Having served as a pastor in both local congregations and in the conference office, I think, and I've heard some bishops say, when you become bishop, there's a whole dynamic shift that happens with other clergy that you're friends with, and so forth. So I'm sure there's some all kinds of things. I mean, even when I became a pastor, that was one of the things that I was thinking, okay, that's going to be weird. Am I going to be invited to the same parties I was invited to before I became a pastor? Are people going to have the same conversations near me before? So my question is, what advice would Pastor Laura give, assuming an election to bishop? What advice would Pastor Laura give to newly elected Bishop Laura? Is there anything you can like? Maybe it's kind of I don't want to lose sight of this kind of.
Well, there's so much hypothetical to that it's hard for me to wade through a little bit, just because I really am not. I think things are so different that may not happen. I mean, it may not have happened even if we had started today, but it certainly may not happen in November of 21 for any number of reasons. There are lots of reasons why that might not happen. But I think, so the way I would reframe that question is, what would I tell myself as that role, or anybody who ends up in that role, whatever?
Sure, yeah.
I mean, I think that, I think a couple of things. One is that the layers of institution are so heavy that, and I think bishops, at least some of them, seem to already know this, they have to find their place where their original calling from God is still alive and is fed, and where they can exercise that. everybody's called in a little different way, and has different set of gifts. But if you don't have some place where that giftedness and that thing that makes you light up as a servant of the Lord, if you're not ever able to do that thing, that's going to be deadening and not good for the body. The leader needs to have a place where their, your basic call and love story with the God who called you gets fed and stays alive. And I have to say, that's that's a challenge for people in the more bureaucratic roles in ministry. It is. I mean, I will say that the COVID crisis, I've preached more since COVID, and I enjoyed that than I preached now and then before that, and I don't know why that is. I have no idea. I was ready to go wherever before that, but those are things that I felt called to in the beginning, and that I don't get to baptize babies unless my siblings have children and ask me to baptize my niece or nephew. That's how that works. So what are the parts? How do you translate the giftedness and the call and to keep that vitality alive? And then I think it is helping people not be afraid, help people have courage about the changes that are in front of us. Because this is an era of rapid transformation, or at least change, if not transformation. Hopefully it ends up transformation in love. That's emotional intelligence, that's personal self-reflective capacity, your ability to manage your own anxiety, and your ability to help other people manage theirs, and to ask deep questions. Ask good questions about, something beyond the surface, and for the leader to set the tone for that. Mm-hmm. And I do think that absolutely applies at the local church level as well.
Yeah. I was just thinking that applies to all of us. So that's wonderful.
Yeah. And so hopefully those are the kinds of things that I'm trying to kind of keep in my sights, no matter what role I'm, inhabiting in the moment.
Yeah.
I
appreciate you so much taking the time this morning to visit. Looking forward to September, whether it's whether you come down here and preach or preach online or however we do it. But
I'm looking forward to that too. Yes, absolutely.
So,
And Wade, I'm just a little love letter shout out to First Victoria, and I feel like you're such a great match for that church. I cannot believe, and what lovely people. I mean, seriously, we moved there when Joe was 9 months old, mm-hmm. and that church saw me through a couple of pregnancies that I lost, and then celebrated with us when Caroline was born. Mm-hmm. And we left there when she was about the same age as Joe was when we arrived. And just the love and the wisdom and the care.
Well, they still refer to her as one of their babies. I mean,
I know.
Reader.
Nana Reader kept out. Nana Reader was answering the phone in the VIP church mouse, I guess it was VIP. I can't remember what we called the church people there.
Right.
And she'd have that baby, and she'd be answering that phone. Yeah, And my office was right next door. She'd bring her in there when we needed to, and then I couldn't be more grateful for a church to take care of this, wet behind the ears preacher who needed to learn all the things. So it's just, I'm full of gratitude for that collective family of faith.
Well, we Cindy and I pinch ourselves all the time about how wonderful.
Well, and you're doing great. Y'all are doing great together.
It's
fun to watch.
We love it. Absolutely.
Good.
So
good. Well, I appreciate your inviting me. This is like I said, there were no softball questions on the list, but I appreciate your thinking and being curious and convening this kind of conversation for all of us.
Thank you for doing it. I appreciate it. And go be the church.
You too. I'll be looking for you in the funny papers. Sounds good.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.